Welcome to today's deep dive. If you've spent any time at all tracking the evolution of unscripted media lately, you already know that we are living through a very strange transitional era.
Yeah, transitional is definitely the word for it. It's a
Right.
massive shift.
Right, and I have this giant stack of sources in front of me today that paints this remarkably detailed picture of an industry that is just desperately trying to re-engineer itself in real time.
Mhm.
We are pulling from some recent entertainment dispatches, specifically the February 2026 coverage from outlets like Betches and Reality Tea. But we also have this really dense, peer-reviewed strategic industry analysis that details the underlying framework of unscripted television.
Which is fascinating on its own, honestly.
It totally is.
Yeah.
But the real backbone of our discussion today, the stuff that really gets into the weeds, comes directly from the consumers.
Yes, the viewers.
Exactly. I have spent hours, and I mean hours, sifting through these intensely analytical, highly critical Reddit threads. We are looking at the digital footprint of a fandom that is actively rejecting the old formulas and demanding something entirely different. So our mission today is to figure out why this is happening and where it's going.
And, the contrast between that formal industry analysis and the raw, completely unfiltered viewer commentary, that is where the real story lives here.
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
looking at a fundamental restructuring of the reality television landscape, specifically how these legacy networks are attempting to mirror the inevitable aging of the millennial generation.
Which is something we are all feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the central case study here is Bravo's transition from the long-running Summer House franchise into its new, highly anticipated spin-off in the city.
Right.
This isn't just about gossip. It is a real-time business case study in managing the logistical and financial acrobatics required when the people on our screens just, outgrow the very premise that made them profitable in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the structural collapse of the original Summer House model.
Let's do it.
Because by the time filming for Season 10 concluded in late 2025, the cracks in the foundation were no longer subtext. They were the main text.
They were glaringly obvious.
So obvious. The original 2017 formula relied on this very specific tension. It was the agonizing Monday to Friday corporate grind in Manhattan, completely relieved by weekend-long, alcohol-fueled escapism in the Hamptons.
Right, the work hard, play hard dynamic.
Exactly. But looking through the Reddit consensus today, the viewers are pointing out that this tension completely evaporated years ago.
It's the inherent paradox of the unscripted genre.
How so?
Well, the longer a cast remains on television, the more the original relatable conditions of their lives just dissolve.
Oh, for sure.
The early seasons resonated because the audience recognized the genuine fatigue of a demanding corporate job. When Friday hit, the desperation to blow off steam felt completely authentic.
Because they actually needed the weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But once these individuals transition into highly compensated public figures, the economic reality shifts entirely. They are no longer stressed professionals escaping the city.
Right.
They are contractually obligated workers commuting to a highly controlled production environment. The Hamptons rental is no longer a retreat. It is literally their primary place of business.
And the audience is hyper-aware of that shift. I mean, the Reddit threads are particularly ruthless about what they're calling the bed-rotting phenomenon.
Oh, the bed rotting. Yeah.
Have you seen these threads? Users are literally cataloging the sheer amount of screen time dedicated to cast members, specifically Paige and Ciara, just laying in bed for hours,
Scrolling their phones.
scrolling their phones, completely disengaged from the purported party happening downstairs. The viewers are noting all the visual cues too, the accumulating dirty dishes, the food wrappers on the nightstand, the visible resentment toward the filming schedule.
Yeah, that behavior is a direct rebellion against the format.
It really feels like it.
From a labor perspective, you are watching individuals who have fully optimized their participation. They understand their value to the network, and they are doing the absolute bare minimum required to fulfill their episodic commitment.
Right, they know they won't get fired just for staying in bed.
Exactly.
Yep.
But from a viewer psychology standpoint, it completely shatters the illusion. Unscripted television relies on the suspension of disbelief. The audience tunes in for aspirational escapism, but instead, they're watching wealthy influencers, treating a luxurious vacation home like a tedious holding cell.
A holding cell. That is exactly what it looks like. And to compensate for that exact lack of organic energy, the production team clearly panicked. Which brings us to the Amazon box theme parties.
Oh boy. The theme parties.
Since the cast was no longer organically throwing the chaotic parties that defined the early seasons, the producers began forcing these incredibly elaborate, highly manufactured themed events.
Just out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. And the Reddit community has essentially turned into forensic accountants over this. They are calculating the environmental and financial waste of hundreds of cardboard boxes arriving weekly.
It's staggering.
It really is. Boxes filled with cheap, disposable decor that gets set up for a 4-hour filming window and then is immediately sent to a landfill. It completely stripped away any remaining authenticity for the viewer.
Well, those manufactured parties are actually a symptom of a much larger systemic geographic restriction.
The permitting issues, right?
Yes. The strategic analysis paper in our stack points directly to what industry insiders call the surf lodge effect.
Surf Lodge. That place used to be the centerpiece of the show.
It did. But over the past decade, the municipalities of Montauk and Southampton have radically altered their zoning and permitting laws to specifically curtail the footprint of reality television and influencer culture. The local pushback is incredibly severe.
I was reading through the town council meeting minutes that were referenced in that industry analysis, and the hostility is just palpable. The local government isn't just annoyed, they are actively denying filming permits.
Across the board.
Yeah, the cast is effectively blacklisted from the actual venues that dictate the Hamptons' social hierarchy.
Which leaves the production company with an incredibly expensive stranded asset.
The house itself.
Exactly. If you cannot film at the restaurants, the clubs, or the key social hubs like Surf Lodge, your multi-million-dollar cast is essentially under house arrest.
Oh.
The geographic scope of the show shrinks to the property line of the rental house. So the producers are forced to import the aesthetic of a party via Amazon deliveries because they are legally barred from participating in the actual local economy on camera.
That makes so much sense, and that geographic restriction totally explains the Sunday morning escape attempts.
The rush to leave.
Yes. The Reddit sleuths pieced together these intense timelines based on the cast's background Instagram stories. They noted how aggressively the cast tries to flee the production house the second their required filming hours conclude.
They just bolt.
They bolt. They are rushing to get to the unfilmed, off-camera venues to experience their actual weekend. The core premise of the show literally became an obstacle preventing the cast from living their real lives.
And when the cast resents the premise, and the local government blocks the production, and the audience sees right through the artificiality, the network has no choice but to execute a structural pivot.
You have to pull the plug.
You have to abandon the compromised environment entirely.
And that pivot officially arrived on February 4, 2026, with the teaser for In the City.
A massive shift.
Unbelievable shift. The transition in the promotional material is remarkably blunt. We hear the iconic "another one in the books" audio playing over footage of the Hamptons house packing up, and then boom, a hard, jarring cut to the grit of Manhattan.
It sets a completely different tone.
It really does. The network's logline specifically emphasizes navigating marriage, parenthood, reinvention, and growing up without growing apart. They are completely abandoning the weekend hookup narrative in favor of the daily grind of adult survival.
This transition is a direct response to the industry-wide phenomenon of spin-off fatigue.
Like what we saw with Winter House.
Exactly. Networks have spent the last few years attempting to iterate on successful properties by simply changing the geography. Look at the attempts with Winter House or Martha's Vineyard.
Right.
The initial strategy was to transplant attractive personalities into new vacation rentals, assuming the environment alone would generate compelling television.
Which didn't work.
No, those properties were ultimately paused because the modern viewer has evolved past the strangers in a house novelty.
The patience for manufactured conflict is completely gone. If two people who just met 3 days ago have a screaming match over a bedroom assignment, the audience just tunes out.
There's no weight to it.
Exactly. The stakes are non-existent.
Precisely. The contemporary unscripted viewer demands deep, heavily entrenched interpersonal histories. They require multi-year emotional investments.
They want to know these people really care about each other.
Yes. In the City is adopting the architectural blueprint that made the Valley such a record-breaking success.
Oh, the Valley is the perfect comparison here.
It is. The Valley succeeded because it took an aging cast individuals who had thoroughly exhausted the narrative utility of working in a sexy Los Angeles restaurant and transplanted them into the suburban realities of mortgages and marital dissolution.
Real adult problems.
Exactly. The history between those cast members was undeniable. In the City is applying that exact same verite approach, replacing the claustrophobia of a weekend rental with the limitless, unpermitted backdrop of New York City.
The strategic analysis source we have outlines this entire maneuver through the lens of truly original CEO Stephen Hirsch's generational market model.
That model is so revealing.
It's intense. The level of demographic targeting happening behind the scenes is just wild. The model categorizes the entire unscripted landscape by age bracket.
Right.
So, the established Real Housewives properties are the retention tool for the Gen X viewer, focusing on established wealth and shifting family dynamics.
Yep.
Then, In the City is the designated vessel for the aging millennial, the viewer who started watching these weekend party shows in their 20s and is now confronting the heavy realities of their late 30s.
It is a highly defensive retention strategy. A network simply cannot afford to lose an entire demographic cohort just because they aged out of the programming they grew up with.
That would be a massive revenue loss.
Huge. By transitioning the core cast into In the City, the network is squishing the storytelling, allowing the format to mature at the exact same rate as the audience.
But to retain that 30-something audience, you really have to deliver stakes that resonate with their current life stage. And the confirmed cast list for In the City brings an unprecedented level of real-world gravity to the screen.
The stakes are incredibly high now.
Yeah. We are looking at the transition of Kyle Cook, Amanda Batula, Lindsay Hubbard, and Andrea Denver with his wife Lexi Sundin.
And that concept of growing up without growing apart is immediately tested by the collapse of the franchise's central infrastructure, Kyle and Amanda's marriage.
Man, the timeline detailed in the sources places their official separation in November 2025, with the public announcement following in January 2026.
It changes everything.
It fundamentally alters the emotional baseline of the new series. We are no longer dissecting minor infidelities at a crowded bar. We are watching the forensic unwinding of a decade-long partnership.
And the real complexity here is that the marriage and the corporate entity are entirely fused.
Loverboy.
Yes, Loverboy. That brand was built on the narrative foundation of their relationship. The brand equity is inherently tied to their public persona as a unified entrepreneurial couple.
So separating is a corporate crisis, too.
It's exactly. Unwinding a heavily capitalized beverage brand while simultaneously navigating a high-profile divorce is an agonizing process. From a production standpoint, it provides a narrative engine that is entirely rooted in consequence.
Real consequences, not just who kissed who.
Right. The conflict is no longer generated by producer prompts or alcohol. It is generated by lawyers, asset division, and the terrifying prospect of starting over at 40.
And that theme of starting over leads directly into Lindsay Hubbard's trajectory. The articles we pulled outlined her transition following the birth of her daughter, Gemma, in late 2024.
A massive life pivot for her.
Totally. For nearly a decade, Lindsay's brand was entirely built on erratic, highly combative behavior, the entire activated persona.
We all remember Don't Activate Me.
Yes, but now the viewer is asked to reconcile that legacy character with the exhausting, hyper-vigilant reality of single motherhood in Manhattan.
It forces a complete recalibration of how the audience interacts with her.
It really does.
The survival mechanics of single motherhood leave very little room for performative conflict. The stakes are immediate and uncompromising. It grounds the entire series in a very sobering reality, which contrasts so sharply with the manufactured drama of the earlier format.
While those transitions provide the core narrative, the digital footprint we analyzed is equally obsessed with the cast members who opted out of this new framework. Paige DeSorber's official exit statement triggered a massive wave of analysis regarding the shifting power dynamics between creators and legacy networks.
This raises such an important question for the industry. At what point does a lucrative linear television contract become an active liability to a modern media personality?
That is the exact question Reddit is asking. The consensus points squarely at her Giggly Squad podcast empire. The users are looking at the sold-out national tours, the merchandise revenue, and the standalone brand equity she has built completely outside of the Bravo ecosystem.
She doesn't need them anymore.
Exactly. The prevailing theory is that Paige recognized the diminishing returns of subjecting her life to the editing bay. When you control a top-charting podcast, you control the narrative.
And the revenue.
And the monetization, yes. If you stay on unscripted television, you risk a producer deciding you need a villain edit, or focusing entirely on the bed-rotting narrative, which could actively damage the external brand you've built.
It is the absolute apex of the creator economy, superseding traditional broadcast models. She utilized the platform to acquire top-of-funnel audience awareness, funneled those viewers into an owned and operated audio product, and effectively bought back her privacy.
It's brilliant when you think about it.
It really is. In an industry where most participants cling to their episodic fees until they are forcibly recast, executing a proactive, highly capitalized exit strategy is incredibly rare.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at a cast member who seems desperate to execute that exact same transition into entrepreneurship, but is conspicuously absent from the in-the-city rollout. The Carl Rapke situation has sparked a ruthless dissection of the economics of reality television. Carl is entirely focused on Soft Bar, his brick-and-mortar, alcohol-free venue in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, which opened in August 2025.
What's fascinating here is the fundamental misunderstanding of how unscripted television functions as an economic engine.
Right. And the armchair economists on Reddit have absolutely shredded the business plan for Soft Bar.
They did not hold back.
Not at all. They are hyper-focused on the specific timeline of his commercial lease in Greenpoint. Users tracked his press interviews where he admitted to paying premium New York City commercial rent for well over a year before the build-out was even completed.
Ouch.
Yeah. The thread calculating the necessary profit margins is just brutal. When you factor in the accrued back rent, the cost of specialized staff, and the construction overhead, the volume of $20 mocktails he needs to sell just to break even on a monthly basis is staggering.
Well, if we look at the historical data of reality stars attempting to transition into hospitality, the failure rate is astronomical.
It rarely works out.
Almost never. The modern reality star views the television show as a marketing channel. The Loverboy model worked because consumer packaged goods scale.
You can ship them anywhere.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The television show acts as a national commercial, driving high-margin e-commerce sales and regional distribution. Brick-and-mortar hospitality does not scale.
No, it's stuck in one spot.
It is bound by the physical constraints of a neighborhood, the whims of local foot traffic, and the brutal overhead of urban real estate.
And the Reddit community is heavily questioning the underlying demand for a strictly non-alcoholic venue in that specific market anyway.
Right, the product market fit.
Exactly. They point out that high-end mocktails are already a standard inclusion in almost every premium bar in New York. The utility of a dedicated dry bar is highly debated when a mixed group of friends can easily patronize a traditional establishment where both demographics are accommodated.
Beyond the flawed business model, though, his exclusion from In the City highlights a profound narrative incompatibility.
He just doesn't fit the new vibe.
No, he doesn't. The architectural framework of the new series is predicated on definitive life transitions: marriage, divorce, parenthood, corporate scaling. For the better part of a decade, Carl's primary storyline has been a cyclical, repetitive narrative of arrested development.
It's always about him finding himself.
Exactly. The audience has watched multiple iterations of his struggle to establish a career, maintain sobriety, and commit to relationships. A series structured around mature, high-stakes adulthood simply cannot sustain a protagonist who remains perpetually stalled in an exploratory adolescent holding pattern.
The network clearly recognized that you can't force a forward-moving narrative on a static character. But while In the City caters to the aging millennial confronting reality, the network hasn't abandoned the escapist, chaotic energy entirely.
I know.
They just reassigned it to a different demographic. Let's look at the flip side of Hirsch's generational market model, the Gen Z vehicle, Next Gen NYC.
This is the necessary counterbalance. If your core properties are aging into heavy existential themes, you must establish a pipeline to acquire the younger, digital native demographic that craves fast, disposable conflict.
And Next Gen NYC pulls from the established lore of the network by casting the 20-something offspring of legacy Real Housewives.
The Nepo babies.
Exactly. The Reddit reaction to this cast is a fascinating study in how Gen Z audiences process and categorize unscripted behavior. The community immediately sorted the cast into highly specific archetypes. Let's look at the behavior that triggered the immediate backlash.
There was quite a bit of it right out of the gate.
Huge backlash. Charlie is facing intense criticism. The users are analyzing scenes where he displays aggressive behavior toward female cast members, heavily critiquing what they identify as deeply internalized racism. The audience threshold for that kind of toxic behavior is absolute zero now.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the younger viewing audience operates with a highly developed socio-political vocabulary.
Much more than previous generations.
Significantly more. Behaviors that might have been glossed over as just drama in 2010 are Immediately diagnosed and condemned by the modern viewer.
Exactly. And the rejections aren't just ideological. They are behavioral, too.
Like with Georgia.
Yes, Georgia is facing a wave of viral disgust purely based on hygiene. Viewers are literally isolating footage of her failing to wash her hands and maintaining chipped nail polish. It is a very visceral rejection.
The internet doesn't miss a detail.
They really don't. And then you have Ava Dash, navigating the classic broke but snobby archetype. The audience is dissecting the cognitive dissonance of someone unable to manage basic financial independence while simultaneously lecturing peers on the historical legacy of streetwear fashion.
It is a potent combination of unearned entitlement and a complete lack of self-awareness.
It's reality TV gold, honestly.
It provides the necessary friction for a high-turnover reality format. But an ensemble cannot survive purely on friction. The audience requires a grounding element to maintain long-term investment.
And those grounding elements are coming from surprising sources here. Ariana Bierman is generating a significant amount of positive sentiment.
Which I don't think anyone saw coming.
Not at all. Given her mother's highly chaotic legacy on the network, the audience anticipated a disaster. But the Reddit consensus is highlighting her grounded, surprisingly pragmatic approach to the group dynamics.
Refreshing.
It is. Similarly, Brooks Marks is being praised specifically for opting out of the performative outrage. Users are heavily indexing on his dynamic with his father, Seth, noting that their supportive relationship provides a necessary emotional palate cleanser amidst the petty arguments.
That subversion of expectations is crucial. When a legacy name delivers unexpected competence or emotional intelligence, it creates a highly sticky narrative for the viewer.
There's one cast member, however, generating an incredibly fractured response. Giudice's presence is dominating the discourse, and the Reddit community is analyzing her behavior through a very specific, polarized lens.
She's definitely the lightning rod of the season.
Oh, for sure. Many users are mapping projected political leanings onto her interpersonal conflicts. They note she gives off Caroline Manzo vibes, essentially adopting the posture of a strict, scolding matriarch, which feels super incongruous for a cast in their early 20s.
Right.
And the boards are aggressively filtering her every decision, alliance, and argument through that assumed overarching political alignment. They are heavily speculating she has, quote, Trumpy political leanings. Now, just to be crystal clear to you listening, we are strictly remaining impartial here. We are only reporting the audience's observations from the source material and taking no political stance whatsoever on those rumors.
Right. It's about how the audience is perceiving and reacting to her presence. And the way the audience metabolizes Next Gen NYC highlights the fundamental difference in pacing.
It feels like a totally different show.
Because it is designed to be. The editing structure of this series is tailored for a completely different attention span. The scenes are shorter, the cast is larger, and the integration of secondary social media narratives is constant.
The drama just moves faster.
Exactly. The conflicts lack the permanence of a divorce or a failed business. It is the digital equivalent of watching college roommates argue over a shared utility bill.
So what does this all mean? When we pull back from the specific cast dynamics and the real estate logistics, why does the underlying architecture of these shows actually matter to the broader media landscape?
It matters because unscripted television serves as an incredibly accurate barometer for the sociological anxieties of its viewership.
We're watching our own anxieties play out on screen.
Exactly. The demographic that fueled the rise of the escapist weekend party format in the late 2010s is now staring down the barrel of middle age.
It's hitting us all.
They're navigating shifting economic realities, the isolation of remote work, and the complex restructuring of their own social circles. If the media they consume refuses to acknowledge that maturation, the audience experiences a profound disconnect. They reject the artificiality.
That brings up the concept of parasocial relationships, which the industry analysis touched on heavily. If you think about it, the audience has spent hundreds of hours over nearly a decade forming one-sided emotional attachments to these specific individuals.
We feel like we know them.
We really do. So when the network attempts to force those individuals into outdated juvenile frameworks like those Amazon box parties, it feels like a direct betrayal of that long-term investment.
It feels insulting to the viewer.
It does. The audience demands authenticity. When a show actually leans into the terrifying, unstructured reality of adulthood, when it documents the raw pain of unwinding a marriage built in the public eye or the daunting isolation of single motherhood, it provides an incredible sense of catharsis.
And that catharsis is the ultimate commodity in modern media. Watching individuals with seemingly perfect, curated lives grapple with the exact same structural failures and life transitions that the viewer is experiencing validates the viewer's own struggles.
It makes us feel less alone.
Precisely.
Sure.
It creates an entirely new, highly durable bond between the content and the consumer.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. We traced the total structural collapse of the forced geographic confines of the Hamptons escapism model.
The surf lodge effect.
Right. And we unpacked the aggressive demographic restructuring that birthed in the city and Next Gen NYC, allowing a network to simultaneously capture the heavy existential realities of the aging millennial while feeding the fast-paced, high-friction demands of Gen Z.
It really is a masterclass in a legacy media brand refusing to age into obsolescence.
It completely is. The transition from the artificial to the authentic is fully underway.
But this structural evolution leaves us with a final, long-term industry implication to consider.
What's that?
Well, we have documented how the unscripted format successfully commodified the reckless exploration of the 20s, and how it is currently attempting to monetize the heavy structural transitions of the late 30s and 40s.
Right.
But what is the terminal velocity of this genre? In 2 decades, will the core audience still be demanding real-time reflections of their own aging process?
That is a wild thought.
Will we eventually see a format dedicated to the granular realities of estate planning, Medicare navigation, and the psychological weight of empty nesting? Or does the inherent vanity of the reality star persona prevent the format from ever truly surviving the transition into senior citizenship?
I suppose we will have to reconvene in 20 years to analyze the premiere of The Real Retirees. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I hope this analysis provides a sharper framework for understanding the invisible machinery driving the media you consume. Keep questioning the structure, look closely at the edits, and we will catch you on the next one.